welcome to this week's episode of the MovieBabble Podcast. This week you've got myself and Brennan, and we're talking about some of the nothingness going on at the box office. There's actually been some activity, especially with South by Southwest and just some of Netflix's new releases. There's been some new stuff, but overall it's pretty empty. But AMC continues to be a hot topic, and there have been talks between AMC and Amazon, leading a lot of people to believe there's going to be some kind of a merger there, which would, I think, be interesting. And considering that AMC was doubtful it could coast through the summer off of its current finances, I don't think that's like beyond the question at this point, honestly.
Yeah, no, this is a story that has kind of just arisen over the last couple hours today. And it's pretty interesting actually to think about. AMC stocks absolutely skyrocketed today, 56% increase. And that main reason, as you said, there is talks with Amazon maybe becoming a partner with AMC. They've had meetings and they've held talks, and that's why you were seeing the stock spike. I wonder how that would work. I mean, I think that would be pretty good for some of their Amazon originals. I think we spoke about this before we got on the air, but it'd be a great outlet for them to throw that in there. And who knows, maybe Amazon. I mean, they've got the money. They're in a great spot financially, so maybe they would take a risk on AMC here. And this is something that we will definitely have to keep an eye on in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I think Amazon could actually benefit quite a bit because they've been pretty aggressive with all of their movies, and they've typically had a couple contenders coming out in theaters these past few years. And I think if they were to have a partnership with AMC, it would let them kind of make their movies a little bit more of a dominant force and new stuff that's coming out. And then obviously AMC just kind of needs money and a little bit more support to just stay present.
Oh, yeah. No, you're right, 100%. I think AMC needs the help here, and we knew that from the last couple of weeks just by hearing some of the stories and some of the reports and everything with Trolls World Tour and Universal. But this is something that is definitely a developing story, something that we're just kind of learning about the origins today of this sort of talk between them and Amazon, but it will be interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll know a little bit more about that. And just based on the fact that the merger talks are somewhat in the open and people know they're going on to some degree and that the stock prices are rising, I'm sure we'll get more official word on it here in the next couple days. But speaking of Amazon, they've been hosting the South by Southwest Film Festival on their platform since obviously that was not able to be held like it normally would, just due to coronavirus concerns. And I believe Nick talked about it last week, but I checked out the movie TFW No GF. Had you heard of that one?
100%. I mean, I don't know too much about it, but I laugh whenever I see the title, and I laugh whenever I see the cover art.
Yeah, Nick talked a little bit about just kind of what it means, but it's basically a movie about incel culture and just like the 4chan community and just like a lot of the fringe internet people that post kind of borderline stuff. It's like just kind of the oddballs of the internet is basically what it's about. And it feels very much like it almost condones this kind of behavior. It never really questions anything. It just kind of presents it. It's like, here are these people. This is what they are and what they do, and it doesn't really force them to question anything. Like, you get kind of happy endings for quite a few of them at the end. It's just such an odd thing to watch for an hour and a half, is you're just like watching these people explain kind of the crazy stuff they do, like posting pictures about going to go see Joker with their assault rifles, with almost no consequences at it, and they kind of get rewarded for it at the end. And you just wonder, like, what was the point of this movie? But you can't look away either.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I mean, just speaking of South by Southwest, it would be great if that was kind of opened up to the international market, because being in Canada on the Amazon Prime, that's not a part of our Prime membership. So it'd be great if that would be opened up to just not the United States. But it's great that they're doing that in the first place, like partnering there for that kind of a virtual festival. But yeah, this is a movie that I don't know if I'll watch it, but it sounds rather interesting, just the way you put it, and it's odd. But did you? I mean, did you find some enjoyment in it?
I mean, yeah, it's just you like it's. I think it once the novelty wears off after about the first like 15 or 20 minutes is it's a little more dull, and you're like, okay. Fortunately, it's only an hour and 23 minutes long, so you don't have to sit through too much of it. But once kind of the novelty of just like how weird people on the internet can be wears off, it's just like kind of there for the rest of the duration.
Yeah, no, that's. I mean, TFW, no GF. It's just a title that kind of grabs your attention. um, Kind of besides that, though, another newer release, kind of straying away from the South by Southwest, though, was Becoming, which is the Michelle Obama documentary. I remember last year, the book came out with the same name, and it was her. Um, I was mixed up. Autobiography, I guess it would be, or biography. I don't know. What's the one when it's you writing about yourself?
It's autobiography.
Otto, yes, I knew it. My first guess was correct. But this is kind of a film based off that, actually. And I haven't got a chance to check it out yet, but it is on my list. And I did just want to talk about it because I think it's a further step for the Obama production company, because this was put out by Higher Ground Productions, which is the Obama's film studio. And they've had a few documentaries come out already. We remember last year with American Factory, and then this earlier this year with Crip Camp. Did you get a chance to see Crip Camp at uh, Sundance?
No, it was one of the ones that I got in line just a little bit too late and was cut off. I can't remember what I saw as replacement for it, but it was one of the buzzier movies coming out of the festival.
Yeah, no, for sure. I heard some great things about that, and Nick has praised that big time. But Becoming is now, I guess it would be the third movie from them, from their studio, and it is just kind of focusing on her life and her time as First Lady. So that's something that has been quite buzzy, and it's I don't know where it is on the top 10 in the States, but it's trending very high right now in Canada. And yeah, that's kind of another one of our newer releases this week, and it's kind of just another step forward for the Obamas in terms of film.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll see them kind of expand a little bit more, just because they have had pretty solid success so far, and especially when you've got Netflix paying most of your bills, you can manage quite a bit.
Definitely. I wonder if they'll. I don't know if they've talked about it yet, but do you think they're gonna delve into non-documentary features and just feature films?
I wouldn't be surprised. I think documentary is kind of a safe place for them to start, just because like when you're talking about the Obamas and putting their lives on screen, I think that's an easy way for them to go, because obviously they were there, they know what to document, and the creative teams they build have direct access to the people they're trying to document. But I think also it comes down to the fact that documentaries are a lot cheaper, and so when you have a successful documentary, you make a lot more money from it, just comparatively to where if you were going into an actual full fictional production, it'd be more expensive. But I think it's definitely a step down the road for them.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that.
But other than that, Netflix is just being Netflix. Still has kind of an odd top 10 this week, which we'll run through a little bit. I'm not as familiar with all the movies on Netflix's top 10, but there is one that I can't wait to talk about. But Netflix's top 10 this week, at number one was John Henry. Number two was Sleepless, followed by Becoming, which Brennan just talked about, at number three. Extraction, still in their top 10 at number four. Den of Thieves at number five. House at the End of the Street at number six. And that's followed by The Willoughbys, still in there at number seven. Dangerous Lies at number eight. Despicable Me, still holding pretty strong at number nine. And my personal favorite at number 10, Arctic Dogs. Um, so I'm not very familiar with most of these movies. I didn't even know there was a Terry Crews John Henry movie. And like it looks vaguely familiar watching the little preview of it, but I had almost no memory of that existing.
So yeah, it's kind of an odd top 10, as you said. And John Henry, I think that's a 2020 film. It came out in January. Kind of an interesting cast there. Ludacris is in it. Terry Crews, as you said. But yeah, the top 10's odd. But the one we have to talk about is Arctic Dogs. I think that's the most important one of the top 10 right now.
I think Arctic Dogs is a movie that everyone's familiar with. It's just a classic. I mean, you just look at the poster and you just see this tremendous Norm of the North style animation. And then this trailer was like all over the place last year, and it was just I remember very little of it because it feels like a very basic movie. But the tag at the end of the trailer is this classic, almost Shakespearean line of a gas explosion, and the Arctic Fox, main character played by Jeremy Renner, says, "It looks like the planet made a poopy," and it just I've been brought to tears very few times in movie theaters, and that line just got me every time.
Oh goodness. I mean, I think what we do have to note about this movie, despite being a critical flop, we have to acknowledge that it is a misunderstood masterpiece that will probably be recognized years from now as one of the more defining films of the last decade.
Well, I mean, even talking about Norm of the North, like that movie came out in 2016 and made just $30 million, but it spawned multiple sequels because of its success, just streaming and with stuff like on Netflix. um, so I'm not saying there couldn't be an Arctic Dogs 2. Maybe that's in the future somewhere.
I think one of the quick differences we do have to point out is we have a budget on Norm of the North of $18 million versus Arctic Dogs, which sat at 50 million, and it barely cracked 9 million at the box office. So it was sad, and it's also by our favorite studio, the Entertainment Studios Motion Pictures. Nick finds that studio a little suspicious just with that name, but I mean, no hard feelings. I think we're going to continue to praise Arctic Dogs and all its failures for years to come.
Yeah, and Brennan and I were talking about our favorite entertainment studios motion pictures uh, before we hopped on and started recording. And what I found really interesting is that their self-proclaimed philosophy is that they're chasing studio crumbs. So they're not aiming very big. They're just trying to catch the leftovers. And maybe with Arctic Dog streaming at number 10, it starts there. Maybe next week it'll be number 8. Just slowly move up the Netflix leaderboard.
Whisper of a Dream.
Also, I do want to just go back to John Henry a little bit. The poster that Netflix has for it in the top 10 looks like a direct to Redbox movie. Like it's just that very like clearly photoshopped kind of over the top style that looks like something you'd find for $1 in a vending machine.
Oh goodness, yeah, no, you're right. It does. It does. Might have to watch it, see how great it is.
Yeah, I'm not really planning on it, but if you wanna take that as part of your week this week, then I'll be here to support.
Thank you. I'll let you know how it is.
But other than that, we also had just one newer release this week as well, and that was How to Build a Girl, which is a Beanie Feldstein movie. It was released through IFC. It also had kind of made some film festival rounds at TIFF in September last year, and I've heard not necessarily mixed reactions about it, but nothing that's just tremendously positive, but certainly nothing that is kind of loathing it.
Yeah, I don't know too much about this film other than that Beanie Feldstein was great in it. There's a huge disparity between audience reaction and critical reaction to this movie, so I always find that interesting, and that's not something that turns me off by any means. I think that makes a movie actually more interesting to me when there is that disparity. But I wonder what it is about the film, but I know that I've heard great things about Beanie Feldstein's performance, so I'd be down to watch this at some point. And she's really a great actress, and I'm excited to see her career blossom. It's still only like a year since I found out that she's Jonah Hill's sister. Like that's that when Booksmart came out, I think that's when I figured out, and I think that's when a lot of people figured out. But it's still a weird thing that I haven't come to terms with.
See, I think you're forgetting with the critical score being so different from the audience score is that critics are paying off, or the movie studios are paying off critics, and that's what you're forgetting here.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
that we learned that that was a real thing when there was a lot to do with the DCEU and the fact that Justice League was so low because they were being paid off by Disney to rate the film low. I think that's when the conspiracy began.
and I think it just like comes down to the fact that all the Snyder Bros kind of created that idea, because that was when like Thor Ragnarok, and honestly, I think that was probably like the MCU's most consistent year in 2017, because you had Guardians 3, which wasn't um, as good as the first one, but was still pretty solid in my opinion, and critics seem to think so. And then you had Spider-Man: Homecoming, which nobody really had real expectations for before then because of how the Amazing Spider-Man 2 had ended. And then you had Thor Ragnarok, which, based on how the first two Thor films went, everybody like really didn't expect much from that movie, and like Disney was just killing it with Marvel. And then Justice League came out and just destroyed the last brain cells I had in my body. But yeah, Disney pays off critics, except when they don't. I think The Last Jedi was another big push in that, with all the fringe people on the internet that were really going after it were upset because it had such a good Rotten Tomatoes score.
Yeah, no, it's absurd that people do think that that happens. But it's clear that it's happening here with How to Build a Girl.
It's very clear. I'm tired of these critics just being paid off. It makes me wish that we could get paid off. We'll have to talk to Nick about that.
Yeah, I think that's something we have to take up with the boss.
But that's pretty much all the new stuff going on. But fortunately, streaming and physical media do exist. So even though there aren't any new movies in theaters right now, there's still stuff to watch. So I know for me, I spent most of this week watching the Mission Impossible movies, and that was very disappointing at times. But for the most part, was pretty thrilling and just like a great way to unwind at the end of the day. Just watching Tom Cruise run and like almost kill himself and flip out of buildings and fly helicopters upside down. It was a very nice way to de-stress, honestly.
Yeah, Mission Impossible Fallout, the sixth one. I know that you are just an absolute fan of it. You love it, and me as well. I love that film. It was such a surprise for me because I enjoyed Ghost Protocol and Rogue Nation, the fourth and fifth films. But I wasn't too familiar with the first three. I remember seeing the second one when I was young, but I was never really a huge fan of the franchise. I liked the movies, but I didn't really think about them too much. But then when Fallout came out, it blew my mind. I mean, it's a gorgeous movie, really well done, incredibly entertaining. But really, I think it should be held up there as one of the better action movies of all time, and it's a great time. I think I saw it twice in theaters when it first came out, IMAX the first time, and that was just a fantastic experience.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where like the first one I've seen quite a few times. I remember watching it growing up, and then like I mean the especially as a fan of Shrek 2, you see like a lot of the imagery from the first one that was really replicated a lot in like the 2000s, like with the repelling scene. And like in Shrek 2, that's what they do when they come in to break Shrek a donkey and puss out of the jail. And so like I was pretty familiar with the iconography of it. And then like I've seen 4, 5, and 6 in theaters, and I had like vague memories of 3. But the second one, I know I've never seen it all. I didn't really know anything about it other than that there was a second one and that Tandy Newton was in it. And man, was I let down. Like I didn't really have expectations going into it, and it was just really bad. Like it was it was really like hypersexual for a Mission Impossible movie. Like Ethan Hunt is just horny in that movie, and that's just like his thing. And there's a lot of like very classic John Woo slow motion backflips that don't really fit with the context of like any of the action or the plot from any of the other movies, but they're just there. And there's like a lot of really obvious shots of characters just staring right down the barrel of the camera that really pulls you out of everything that's going on. And it was just such a bizarre movie. I felt like maybe I was watching Ang Lee's Hulk or something because it was just so out there.
Yeah, no, that's as I said, that's the only one I've seen of the first three, and I don't remember it at all, really. But yeah, that's it's kind of a rough experience. But it's a funny franchise that um, has gotten better. You know, I mean, the first one is better than the second one, yes, but then the third one made good improvements over the second, and then since then they've just kind of excelled and really taken off with the last few. And I'm excited to see what happens with 7 and 8. I know they got pushed back a year with coronavirus, but there is a going to be a back-to-back production on those, and I wonder if it'll be Tom Cruise's goodbye to the franchise.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when they made the first one came out in '96, and it took them quite a while to get the second one off the ground. There were just a ton of production issues, which is why weirdly we got Hugh Jackman as Wolverine because the original actor was held up filming Mission Impossible 2. So I guess some good did come out of it. And then, there was a 6 year gap in between 2 and 3. And, that was just kind of a long time and kind of the fire for the franchise had died down. And then when the fourth one came out, it was meant to be the send off to Tom Cruise and really to hand the franchise over to Jeremy Renner, which, I mean, it was just received well enough. It actually had the lowest opening weekend of the franchise and then went on to be, I believe, the highest grossing out of all four of them in the end, just because word of mouth was so good. And so obviously, like Tom Cruise is stuck around, and now we've gotten two more that have already come out and two more that are on the way since then. But I think it's especially because they're filming and releasing back to back. I think that's pretty indicative of some sort of finality to it.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see what happens. And another little bit of movie news we should talk about that kind of came out this week was that Tom Cruise might be filming in space. You probably heard of that. Elon Musk and his I think it's uh, what is it, SpaceX or something like that, is his program, reached out to Tom Cruise and they want to get a movie shot in space.
Yeah, I'm really curious how that's gonna gonna work out, and what the limitations will be. Um, just because or is it going to be something that's like filmed on a space station and then you have in space sequences, or it's supposed to be like everything is filmed 100% like in space? Like what is this going to look like? um is it going to be more stunt focused? Is it just going to be more on, look, we can film stuff in space? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, and even if the movie, I mean, even if it happens, who knows if it'll happen? I think it's at this point it's an idea, but who knows? I mean, Elon Musk can deliver the money, and Tom Cruise can definitely. I mean, he's gonna have to train to become an astronaut, right, or something like that. But he's already, I think, said he's been willing to do that. I think that if that was to happen, if we were to have a world where um, people are going to the movies, say obviously coronavirus is down by now. It's years in the future, and now we got this first movie shot entirely in space about to come out or something like that, starring Tom Cruise. I think no matter what the quality of the movie, I feel like that would be a pretty hot ticket, and I think a lot of people would go to see it just based off intrigue alone.
Yeah, I think so. I think it'd be kind of like Avatar, where it's just there's so much curiosity as to like how did they pull this off, and even kind of going back to Mission Impossible, like that was the big draw with the fourth one because he was hanging on the side of the Burj Khalifa. This was like right after it had been finished, so it was already a big deal because it was the tallest building in the world, and then here's Tom Cruise dancing on a wire, like running around it. And I think like a lot of Tom Cruise's movies really last because of that. Like even with the with Rogue Nation, it was Tom Cruise was hanging on the side of a plane, so we've got to go see that. Or with the helicopters, where he became a helicopter pilot and trained for months, and then did most of his fight scenes with a broken ankle. And just if you put Tom Cruise in an extreme situation, I think we've proven that audiences will flock to it.
Yeah, I mean it'll be interesting for sure. But that yeah, I think just based off movie news, I think that's probably good. But for me, what I've been watching uh, this past week was actually the original Star Wars trilogy. It's a trilogy that I haven't watched in a while. I've always loved it. But I rewatched it over the past few days, and it's still just as good. I don't know though. I think we talked about this after I watched them, but for me, the original in '77 and Empire are essentially tied. I really love both of them. I think Empire is definitely stronger thematically, and I think that it's more realized and there's more iconic moments in it. But for me, A New Hope really stands up to it just because of it being the first in the franchise and just the magic of it. And I think I could watch that movie all the time. I think it's just such an enjoyable and watchable and fun movie.
Yeah, and I think it's the same for me because I watched them all a few weeks ago now, and like, I think the older I get, the more I see kind of the flaws in the fourth one, but there's just so much magic to it, and I think even when the prequels are bad, like you can still see George Lucas just he brings magic to the table, and I think there's just so much of it in A New Hope that I didn't really care about any of the story flaws or ways the effects haven't held up because there's just so much that is going to hold up no matter what.
No, yeah, definitely. And I mean, for me, I didn't really notice the effects too much. I know in Empire, there's definitely a lot of moments where you might question visual effects as well. But I feel like they used visual effects much less in A New Hope. That it's not quite as noticeable. Sure, it's noticeable, but it's not a real bother to me just because of how magical that story is, how special that story is, and how awesome it is to see that cast together for the first time on the big screen. But yeah, that's a fun film, and it was a great way to spend the last week. And now this week I'm going to be watching the prequel. So wish me luck. It's been years, but yeah, that's kind of what I've been watching. Also, last night I watched La La Land. What a fantastic movie! Still, I mean, a gorgeous film. And yeah, all day I've been listening to the soundtrack today. So.
Yeah, La La Land is it's a movie I think about a lot, and I think like that's just Damien Chazelle in general for me. But yeah, like La La Land, especially because it has the music, and I'll just get Another Day of Sun or something stuck in my head, and then I've got to listen to the whole soundtrack and really get that whole experience all over again.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like Whiplash more, but they're both really two fantastic films. And even First Man is a movie that I think about often, more for the score. I think the score in that film is absolutely phenomenal. Robbed of a best score at the Oscars 2 years ago. Not even nominated. And it's weird because it won essentially every other award show. It won, I think, the Critics' Choice, the Golden Globes, the BAFTAs, and then it just didn't even get nominated at the Oscars for Best Score. Um, I forget if it was disqualified or something. I don't know what happened, but it definitely deserved a nomination. Fantastic score, and Ryan Gosling's great in First Man as well. But really, it's the score that brings me back to that movie. But Whiplash and La La Land are two modern day classics that Damien Chazelle has crafted.
Yeah, Whiplash is something that's always hanging around my top five movies of all time ever since I saw it, 5 or 6 years ago, however long that was. I'll just sit there and think about JJ Abrams, J.K. Simmons, just yelling because his lines and insults are iconic. Just like on the same level as Arlie Army from Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah, no, it is definitely a modern day classic. I mean, it's just such a neat and unique film, and especially in Whiplash, just those last 5 to 10 minutes are just you can't take your eyes off the screen. Like your heart's in it, your everything. I mean, he's a special director, and for him to be as young as he is, and having made such great movies up to this point, just a handful of movies he's made, but they're all really phenomenal. So I'm just so excited to see what he has next. I know he's got the Emma Stone, Brad Pitt, Babylon film that's supposed to come out in a couple years, but he's going to have a wonderful career.
Oh yeah, and I mean he's just getting started. He's only 35, but he's already just done so much. I mean he helped write 10 Cloverfield Lane, which I don't think a lot of people know, but it's just kind of a cool thing. And it's the only Cloverfield movie that I like really heavily gravitate towards. Um, and then yeah, Whiplash and La La Land, and I think Whiplash has gotten a little more relevant the longer it's been, just because La La Land really introduced him to kind of the mainstream and helped Whiplash meet a broader audience. And it's nice to see him just making such phenomenal stuff and just continuing to make stuff.
Yeah, that's a really neat tidbit too that he helped write on 10 Cloverfield Lane. I think I really like the original Cloverfield movie. I think in terms of found footage movies, it's up there with being the best. I mean, most of them are pretty bad, but I think it's one of the good ones. But 10 Cloverfield Lane, oh my God, that's a really good movie. A movie that absolutely like took me off guard when I went to see it. I mean, John Goodman, that's all you need to know about that movie. But Damien Chazelle is I think he's a talent for sure, and the fact that he did help write on that film, I think that shows that he has some range that we are going to see over the next few decades.
Yeah, and obviously he wanted to kind of focus on similar themes with La La Land and Whiplash, and he's talked about how his first three movies film a trilogy, kind of in the way that you look at very different movies, but the Cornetto trilogy, where a lot of the themes and ideas are kind of the same, but obviously you're making different movies. And so I'm interested to see just kind of what his next phase looks like.
Yeah, no, that'll be awesome, and I know La La Land was a PG 13 film as well as First Man. If I remember correctly, I think Babylon is going to be R rated, so I think that'll be interesting to look into.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And then I'm at a point where I'm not really sure what I plan on watching this week, which is kind of nice to not have a plan and just kind of put on whatever tickles my fancy. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, me as well. I mean, I got the prequels, but I mean, I'm pacing like 3 movies a day right now, so I mean, I got 2 more in the days that I watch them, and it'll just be nice to explore movies that I loved when I was younger, or definitely 100% movies that I've never seen. But I got to make sure I don't watch too much or too many great films because I gotta delve into the Netflix originals every once in a while too.
Got to keep the bell curve pretty spread out.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've been trying to keep a little bit of a more of a balance between classics and modern stuff, and so I went pretty modern with Mission Impossible, so I might take it back a little bit further this coming week.
Yeah, no, that'd be a good idea, and I'm excited too because I think we spoke about this before we got on, but there are finally going to be some new releases hitting VOD. We know Capone, the Tom Hardy film, is coming out. We know Scoob is going to be coming out on demand, and then the Pete Davidson film. I keep losing the name of it, but it's going to be coming on Hulu. That film. So we are going to have a busy week in terms of newer movies next week, and that'll be interesting for sure.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting, and I'm kind of excited for Scoob. To be honest, I loved James Gunn's Scooby Doo movies as a kid, and I'm interested to see how they're because they're definitely playing at some kind of Hanna-Barbera cinematic universe with some of the Rocky and Bullwinkle characters. I mean, Dick Dastardly's kind of the main villain in Scoob from what we've seen so far. So I'm curious to see how they tie everything together and whether this is a good Scooby-Doo movie or just kind of a mess from trying to make it multiple cartoons into one movie.
Yeah, no, this is Scooby Doo has always been great, but I'm excited to see this for sure. I just hope that it's not too juvenile. You know, I want it to be something that the whole family can enjoy. I don't know too much about it besides from the trailers. I don't know if I'm reaching there if it has the potential to be too juvenile. But I really do hope it's a good time. So that's the one I'm definitely excited for, and I'm hyped to see Tom Hardy in Capone. It's always great to see Tom Hardy kind of go crazy. He's a fantastic actor, and it's great to see him get another vehicle.
Yeah. So we'll be back next week talking more about it. Maybe talking about Scoob. Um, I've been eyeing the Rocky movies for a while, so maybe I'll jump into that. But we'll be back talking about movies to some degree. And remember, you can check us out online at MovieBabbleReviews.com. And we'll see you next week.